welcome back. Today we're going to talk about contract negotiations. Think about all we've talked about. We've talked about how you form a union, how the legal process says you've got to do these things and follow these rules, and so we did that. And now we've got a union. We had an election, and all the election gave us was the right to sit down and negotiate. So now we've done all that fussing and fighting, we've done all that hard work, we are recognized as a union, and now what right we have earned through all that hard work is to sit down at the table with the company and say, let's start talking, let's do this. Now we talked earlier, I think after we talked about what happens when you win the election, is that gives you the right to sit down and discuss the contract, or try to discuss the contract. The company's going to say, well, we'll do that in about 6 months because, you know, it's a busy time of the year and etc. And the union wants to do it tomorrow morning. There's some reasonable time period that the NLRB will decide. If you think the company's dragging your feet, you call the NLRB and they say, come on, dude, you need to pick it up. We need to start negotiation. Now, because you negotiate, ever, never, never do you have to reach an agreement. Ever, 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 never. They usually do. Remember, both sides want the work to continue. Union needs their pay, company needs their productivity. But there's no law that says you guys have to go back and bargain until you reach their agreement. There have been times where an agreement was never reached. Work continued, no contract was ever reached. However, the union did have the right to sit down and talk, but they didn't have a contract. There have been times when this happened up at J.P. Stevens up in the northwestern part of South Carolina, where Stevens said, if you unionize this plant, he was still alive, he said, if you unionize this plant, I will shut it down. Forget about trying to negotiate a contract, I will shut it down. The union won, he shut the plant down. Perfectly legal. So I guess I'm saying this because you go through all this just to get the right to sit down and negotiate. Usually that works fine. Sometimes, though, it doesn't work so fine. We're going to assume that it did work. We've got this union that's been recognized. So in terms of contract negotiation, and that's what we're getting ready to talk about, let's don't look at the first one. Let's assume we've had a union here for 15 years. It's easier to discuss it that way. Principles are the same. It's just easier. That first contract's got all kind of issues with it, and we don't want to get into that right now. We're saying we've had a union here for 15 years. It's 2013. January 2013, we signed a contract. We renewed the old contract, signed a new contract, 3-year contract. It's gonna run out in December 31st, 2015. It's going to run out. So the union knows that, and the company knows that. So for the first year 2013, we rock along. Everything's fine. Everything's good. About halfway through 2014, both sides, somebody on both sides is going to go, hey guys, you know, this contract we've got, it's going to run out. And they say it to their own group. There's a union guy that will say it to the union. There's a management guy that will say it to the company. You know, in about a year and a half, this contract runs out. We need to start thinking about that negotiation, because you know there's going to be a negotiation. So this is almost an ongoing thing. Yeah, we got a little time, a year off after 2013, and maybe not even then, but at least a year and a half out. We're going to start focusing on both sides. They're going to start focusing because they know what's coming. This negotiation is coming. So yeah, each side will sit down independently and look at their preparation for this upcoming negotiation, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's start with management. Let's start with the management preparation for an upcoming negotiation. Now, when I say upcoming, we're talking a year and a half upcoming. It's not like, God, we got to do this next week. I mean, they don't wait. They absolutely understand the importance of this, and so both sides attend to this way out before the time is to actually sit down and negotiate. Okay, Everybody understand that?
Exercises can open your soul and your mind and your entire being to a takeover by demonic forces.
The first thing management will usually do is review the existing contract. Again, we've got a contract right here. I can look and see everything we agreed to a year and a half ago. A lot of times the union, when they finally get into negotiation, will say, look, we got a great contract, let's just re-sign it. And obviously the union doesn't ever want to do that. And the company's going to do that. They don't really mean it. They know the union's not going to agree to that. But I review the existing contract. I look at things that are okay with it. I look at things that go, you know, a year and a half ago, why did we ever agree to that? So I'm picking out things about this contract that I like and don't like. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to review current economic situations. That weighs heavily on what kind of leverage you have, either side going into the union. Going into the negotiation. Research has said that in bad economic times, the union doesn't have a really good hand. Jobs are tight, unemployment's high. We're not about to start kicking up dust and possibly lose a contract or lose our work ability here. Times are good. Usually the union says, okay, there's some money floating around. We'll put a little risk here. We'll negotiate a little harder. So there are all kind of external influences that come in, and one of the biggest ones is that economic situation that you're in as you're heading into this negotiation. The third thing you do is you prepare data. Now this is huge. What does that mean? Prepare data. Well, under that you look at demographics. The demographics of your internal company. Who's working for you? What's their skill level? What's their gender? What's their race? What's their age? These things can have a lot of influence on negotiation. You also look at things like what kind of job classifications do we have here? What's the level of jobs we have here? What does our workforce look like right now? Because obviously as we negotiate, that's really who we're negotiating with. So we're trying to get some kind of idea of who we're going to negotiate. And the next thing in the data, I want to try to think about what the most probable demands are going to be from the union. You know, we signed this contract a year and a half ago, and every now and then we get these complaints. They say, God, we don't like this, and we wish you'd change this, etc., etc. You have heard these complaints. And there are not a million of them. There are probably 2 or 3 big ones. Pay attention to those, and I'm sure that these companies do. They go, guys, we know they're going to fuss about this. We know they're going to insist on this. We just know it. We've heard it. It's just leaking out. And so we need to prepare for that. Let me sit down and think about what are going to be the points of this contract right now that they don't like, or new demands that weren't even thought about in the old contract. The fourth thing I'm going to do is called costing the contract. I can't imagine what people did before Excel spreadsheets. Lord help me. But this is an Excel spreadsheet phenomenon here. I cost the contract. I sit down, now this is the management, I sit down and I literally think, what are they going to ask for? What's in the contract now? What's probably going to happen? And I start throwing in numbers. I'm talking about numbers of employees. I'm talking about compensation, wages, everything I can think that I can cost out. How much is this contract going to cost me? And, you know, it used to be you'd have worst case, best case, and middle case. Well, now that we've got Excel, we don't do that. This is what we think is going to happen. And while we're sitting in a negotiation, we can change those assumptions on the fly. In fact, it's kind of funny when you sit down and look at these negotiations now. Obviously, the union's on one side and the company's on the other side. Everybody's got a laptop in front of them. Half the people in the room at any time will be typing, putting in new data, which is a wonderful tool, but that's just kind of the way it goes. So costing that contract is crucial. The company is going to create what's called a bargaining book. In fact, the union is going to do almost these exact same things. But the company is going to create something called the bargaining book. And it's called that because in the old days it was a printed manual, or probably 4 or 5 printed manuals, cross-referenced. So I'm over here in Manual 1, I'm looking up wages, and I'm going, how does that affect for people who go on vacation? It's cross-referenced to vacations, so go to Book 3, page 83. Nowadays, if you're in the wage section, it'll say you might be interested in vacation time. There'll be a link. You click on it, boom, all of a sudden you're in vacation. Okay, or you're in sick leave. And it tells you exactly how these wages affect all of these issues. So it's very sophisticated now. Technology has been a great boom, and it just gives you an easier way to grab hold of this information so that you can negotiate and really do the negotiation. Another thing you will do in preparation for the negotiation is you will sit down and talk about strike preparation. You don't want to strike. You don't even think it's going to go to strike. You really don't. You know, we're going to fuss and fight about a few things, but I don't think we're in anywhere danger to strike. Doesn't matter. You go ahead and you think about strike preparation. If I really think it's going to be a strike, do I build up my inventory? If I really think it's going to be a strike, do I start training replacement workers? Do I start training my non-union employees to come in and fill in when the union goes out? The point is, I've got that contingency plan ready to go, because if you wait until December of 2015 and it looks like we're going to strike and you haven't done these things, you're not going to build up any inventory in 30 days. You're not going to be able to train these people in 30 days. So even though I don't think there's going to be a strike, I put strike preparation there that at least gives me a format to follow if indeed I determine we're headed for a strike. And the last thing is I need to develop a general strategy. Now, all of these things are part of that strategy. But a general strategy is like, how am I going to approach the union when I sit down to negotiate this contract? Am I going to go in good guy, good cop, bad cop? And am I going to go in conciliatory? And am I going to go in like animosity? You guys are driving us crazy. We don't. So it's not like I get there and decide what my emotion is going to be. They decide what kind of philosophy they're going to go into these negotiations with. What kind of strategy are we going to apply here? And it all depends on the economy right now, on the state of the industry right now, on global economy. I mean, there's so much it involves. So it's not like we can say, well, we always do this, because it depends on what this environment is. Okay, so that's what management does to prepare for this contract. It's important. They give it a long lead time. There's a lot of work to do here. The union's doing the exact same thing. They know the contract's coming up on December 31st, 2015. They know they got a year and a half to get ready for that. Now, we've talked about the hierarchy of unions. You've got the national union, then you've got the local unions. And actually it's more than that. You've got the national AFL-CIO. Under that you'll have the National United Electrical Workers of the United States. And then down here you've got Local 27, Aiken, South Carolina, of Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. The point is, these negotiations, this contract has got to be ratified from top to bottom, not bottom up. The reality is that, or the technical point is, that the local union is the one that signs the contract. However, they will never sign a contract that has not been approved by the AFL-CIO or the United Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. And finally, yes, it looks like the ratification was done at the local level, but it's with the approval of those above. And there's a reason for that. AFL-CIO is not going to let Aiken, a small union in Aiken, agree to a wage that is just so far below all the national wages that electricians are getting that have been fought for by all of these different type of unions. They're not going to let you give it away. They're going to have a centralized control. That makes perfect sense to me. So we're just talking about, in reality, this is the way it goes. So, union preparation for this bargaining, for this contract negotiation. The national level will kind of take a lead in this. they will track national trends. They'll look and say, over the past 2 years, over the past 5 years, whatever, these are the kind of gains that we have made. These are the kind of losses that we have sustained. They're trying to get a feel. What is the temperature of the nation in terms of these electrical workers and these companies that employ these electrical workers? So they know what the reality is. They know what the current environment is. Now, they're always going to want to do and get as much as they can, just like you and I would. But they temper that with, yeah, that's going to be my stance, but in reality, this is probably all I'm about. This is probably all I'm about, the only thing I'm going to be able to get. So they look at it from this big, broad, national trend line. They also look at strategic directions. This is where the country's going. This is where the world's going. This is how those global economies are affecting us. So if we think the global economy is going south, maybe this isn't the time to come in with brand new initiatives and demands. If the global economy is booming and everything's great, maybe this is the time to come in and just say, dudes, we've got to get a bigger piece of this. So, you know, that's the way you look at that, and that's the way the national organizations look at that. On the local level, obviously you're going to have to pick. Remember we said earlier that usually there are two committees that are standing in a local union, and one of them is the negotiating committee. And we pick the local guy or the local woman who has the best ability to sit down and negotiate. They might not be the smartest person. They might not have the best understanding of what's going on, but they can talk. They can facilitate. They can make friends. They can, you know, keep things rolling and keep things moving. So we want that person as our spokesperson. We'll have all the brainiacs and everything else behind them, but we need to go ahead and determine that because, like I said, the negotiation is going to happen on the local level. Chances are, in fact, I almost guarantee it, there will probably be an attorney from the national union that will just be introduced as, here's some counsel that we brought. Well, everybody knows where they're from because you don't want to have anybody from the national union, any official sitting there, because this is a local situation. But you're going to have that connection through that attorney or someone like that sitting there, kind of keeping that local union in line. You know, here's what we talked about, here's the parameters, and I just want to be there while it's going on to make sure you don't get emotional and things get crazy and you don't give away the boat. Now, one last thing that we need to talk about. When the local union finally decides, yes, here's a contract we think we can live with. The minute they say that, in fact, before they said that, they've already sent it to the national union going, we like this. We think we can live with this. We're going to take it to our membership for a vote. The national union will go, cool, we like that. That's good. Or they'll say, absolutely not. You cannot take this to a vote. This is not the contract we want. So the national union has complete control over whether we're going to take this to a vote or not. Because again, they're not going to let it get crazy. They're not going to let it set precedent that they think is bad for the union. So let's say the national union goes, fine, did a good job, they send it back, then you take it to membership and you vote on the contract. This is not always a slam dunk. You know, some of your membership is going, we want it more radical, we want more money, et cetera, et cetera. And so the local union really has a political behavior they have to do to convince their members that we really need to sign this contract. This is good for us, it's good for the national union, it's good for the national economy, we need to go ahead and sign this contract. It usually is pretty easy, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's very difficult to get the locals, even though it's been approved and everybody in the administration of this union like it, the locals really don't like it. The members of the local union are not crazy about this. There's one last thing we need to talk about, and it's just a technical thing. Somebody has to request that negotiations continue. The company would like for the union to say, contract's running out, we don't care, we don't even need a contract, let's just keep working. So the company's not ever going to say, hey guys, you know, that contract's about to run out. Maybe contract is just going to keep their mouth shut. The local union is the one that's going to tap the company on the shoulder and go, dudes, this is coming up. In fact, they have to give them at least a 60-day window before they want to officially sit down and start negotiating. And here, the they here is the union. So the union has to say, we'd like to start negotiating. They're sitting around independently and going, well guys, when do we think we ought to start? Well, we think we ought to start at least 6 months out. So in June 1st, we need to write, we need at least 6 months out. So 60 days before June. So the beginning of April, let's say April and May is 60 days. Beginning of April, they'll send a letter to the company going, we would like to start contract negotiations for the upcoming contract on June the 1st. You give them 60 days notice that it's actually going to happen. Now, the company's been preparing for this long before that, so has the union, but it's an official date. We are now in the process. And that's just a little technical issue. But I don't want to anybody think that, you know, you wake up one day and you go, oh my God, we got 2 weeks and we got to bang this out. No, you've got to give that 60-day period before you ever start negotiating. So this kind of ends the whole thing about unions preparation, management preparation. And so now we need to talk about one more thing. Okay. We've notified the company that we want to start bargaining, negotiating. The contract's coming up. We've talked about how the company prepares for that, how the union prepares for that. Now we need to realize that there are going to be at least 2 people. And you know, the negotiation always focuses between 2 people. You've got 2 spokesmen. There's a ton of people in the room, but 2 spokesmen. There's going to be 2 people sitting across the room from each other negotiating. And a lot of things are going to come into play besides the numbers, besides the actual negotiating activities that are going on. There's a lot of emotion involved. Do I like you? Do I trust you? Have you done something in the past that makes me despise you? Maybe you're old and I don't like old people. I really would rather not talk to old people. Maybe the other side is a female, and well, I'm not going to talk to a female about this. So you've got all these personal things coming into play, all these emotional things coming into play. So people have studied that. What is the behavioral kind of aspects when you go into these negotiations? In fact, 2 people that we really talk about all the time in studies were 2 dudes named Walton and McKersey. They were academics, and they wrote a book called The Behavioral Theory of Labor Negotiations. The behavioral theory of labor negotiations. These guys said, and these guys, they consulted in the union and non-union management negotiations. This was kind of their area of research, and so they were familiar with this. They were there at the table a lot of times, just observing, because they were interested in that. You know, they said it's one thing to say, well, we've got all these economic things we're fussing about, but that's kind of easy. If you think about it, it's either I want more or you're going to give me less kind of thing. What's really interesting about these negotiations is how do I finally convince you to come to my side? Or how do I finally convince you that I'm not coming to your side? That's what they found interesting. So they went and they would sit and watch these negotiations, and then they would go back and record what they wrote and come up with these theories. Now, you know, a theory, nobody wakes up in the middle of the night and goes, I've got a theory. You know, E equals MC squared. Einstein did not do that. A theory is when somebody goes out and looks at 2 things that are happening or 3 things. They look at relationships and they say, why did that happen? How can I explain that? And a theory is nothing but an explanation of what we saw happen. Einstein didn't wake up one morning and go E equals MC squared. Einstein had seen how planets revolve around each other and how light acts and how all this fancy stuff that I know nothing about goes on. And this is the way he translated it. This is the way he explained why the moon hung around the earth. E equals MC squared. And that's probably not even right, but that's what he did. He didn't just come up with it. He observed stuff, and E equals MC squared was the way he explained what he saw. So Walton and McKenzie go into these negotiations, and they look and they observe, and they go, how can we explain what we just saw? We need to come up with a theory. Here's what we think happened here. Well, they came up with, I think, 4 things. 2 of them were outrageous. 2 of them were like, seriously, just theoretical, philosophical. We read them and we kind of went, well, yeah, that was fun. You enjoyed that, and I enjoyed reading it, but that's all. 2 of them, however, when the public read them, and academics read them, they went, you know, this really makes sense. I like this theory. This theory appeals to me because I never thought of it that way, but dadgummit, that really does kind of explain what's going on here. So the 2 basic negotiating behaviors, theories of behavior that Walton and McKenzie came up with were called, number 1, distributive, and number 2, integrative. And now we're going to talk about those. Distributive. I would bet that 95% of you and I, all of us, use distributive bargaining all the time. That's what we use. Distributive bargaining is also known as win-lose theory, and it's also known as zero-sum theory. So here's the deal. Distributive bargaining means there's only a limited amount of stuff, and me and you are negotiating over this stuff. And there is a fixed amount of this stuff. For every time I get one of those stuffs, that means that's the stuff you didn't get. Every time I win something in this negotiation, you don't get it, which means you lose it. Mathematically, they go to this zero-sum concept. Every time I get a +1, you get a -1. And the sum of that is 0. So it always comes out to 0. Think about that. When you go to buy a car, you want to win. You want to get all the +1s you can, and you don't care if that dealership gets a -1, goes out of business. You really don't care about that. You just want the best deal you can get. By the way, you're never going to get a good deal. You know that. You should never. They're going to beat you every time. So don't even play that game. But why do we have this theory? Why do we believe, me and you, believe that when I go into negotiation, the goal has got to be for me to get more than you got? In fact, the goal is for me to get it all and you to get absolutely nothing. And don't sit there and go, oh, I don't do that. How many people watched the Super Bowl last year? Did you say, you know what? These are 2 really good teams. They fought hard all year. I just kind of hope it comes into a tie. I wish they could just tie and everybody just be happy. It's against the rules to tie. And it's against the rules because me and you wouldn't watch it. We would not watch the Super Bowl if it could end in a tie. We would just not do it. Absolutely, we're not going to watch that game. It has no meaning to me if somebody can't win and somebody can't lose. We grew up with that mentality. We grew up with that sport. United States versus any other country. We want to win. We want to be the ones that come out on top. So Walton and McKenzie said when you go into these negotiating behaviors, your focus is to win, to beat the other team. I can agree with that on most parts. I really can. However, Walton and McKenzie also identified a second behavior, integrative bargaining, which says it can be win-win. You've got this thing here. Why can't we cut it in half? Why can't I get out of 100, I'll get 40, you get 60? Or any combination in between. Why has it got to be that I get everything and you get nothing? Why can't we have some kind of compromise here? Some kind of integrative behavior here? Again, it's known as win-win. And the key to integrative behavior, according to Walton and McKenzie, is trust. All right, let's talk about why you would want to use an integrative behavior negotiating style. Well, if it's GM versus Ford, maybe I can see. Yeah, we want to win. GM wants to win. Ford wants to win. at the loss of the other companies. I can understand that. But let's say I work for GM. We're all in GM now. It's internal. And I'm in HR. I'm the head of HR for GM, and you're the head of production. And I'm going to use real small numbers to make it easy. We have been budgeting next year to hire 2 new people in the whole company. Make it easy. 2 new people. And I'm in HR, and I really need 2 people. Man, they're killing us over here. We got so much work. Or I'm over here in production, and man, they're killing us over here. Well, I'm in HR, and I'm going to negotiate within the company with whoever to get this resource. And I'm going to say, give me both of them. I've got to have them. If I don't, things are going to be terrible. And production's over there saying the exact same thing. And I do things, and I just make things uncomfortable for production. I go, well, you know, they did this in the past. In other words, I negotiate hard, and lo and behold, I win my 2. Good for HR. Well done, HR. What was the effect on production when I got both of those workers and they got 0? They're not as efficient as they could be. They did need those 2 people. I got them. Yeah, I'm efficient as I can be over here in HR. You're right. We're getting time cards out on time. Everybody's vacation schedule is perfect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But guess what? Production is not being able to produce the cars they wanted to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So while HR has bumped up, production has gone down. So the net effect on the whole company is 0. We didn't help the company out at all. So integrative bargaining says, maybe I really needed 2 people in HR. I really, really did. They're killing us. But you know what? I could do it 1 because production probably needs 1 too. Or they wouldn't have said they needed it. So instead of I getting everything and you getting nothing, we both get this. That's the integrative part of that. Now, intellectually I hear that. Theoretically I see that. Practicality, I'm a distributive kind of guy. I am. You know, that's the way that's the way we've all been raised. You win. It is like Ricky Bobby said, if you ain't winning, you lose. So this is a situation where me and you literally can try to raise our intellect up to say, let me get away from this personal, I need to win all the time, to what is the best effect for the organization. But there again, integrative always goes back to trust. If I don't trust you, I can't share with you. So once we start doing integrative bargaining, you have to maintain that trust. The worst thing you can do is, okay, I'll take 1 employee, you take the other one, good, we trusted each other at work. And 6 months, production has a situation where they could have shared with us and they do not, it's over. It is over forever. It will never come back emotionally or in an area of trust. So remember that. There are negotiating behaviors, personal behaviors that we go into. The 2 biggest ones are distributive and integrative. This is what Walton McCursey said about that. So this kind of ends the negotiating behavior aspect of this course. Have a good weekend, Pete.